Hi, I'm Mike. Welcome back to the shop. Today's project is repairing a rear parking brake. I had a spring that broke on the brake because I had probably over-tightened the brake cable on one of my earlier projects, and the spring broke, and as a result the brake shoes expanded into the brake drum, and we're basically on the full time. So what we're going to do today is take apart the brake assembly, clean it up, and reassemble it with a new spring. So what I'm going to show you will work whether you want to use new components for the entire assembly, or if you just want to replace the repaired parts. Okay, I've already partially disassembled this rear brake. When you do that, there's a couple of steps. If your brake rotor is still riveted to the hub, you'll need to remove the rivets in order to get the hub off. That's actually your first step. I'll put links to one of my earlier videos on how to remove those rivets. So once you've removed the rivets, the next thing you do is you want to make sure that you indicate the orientation of how the rotor came off of the hub, and you can do that by just marking with a marker the bolt hole that came off of. The next thing you do is you want to loosen up your caliper. You actually don't need to remove the caliper from the car or disconnect the brake line. So by doing that, by leaving it all together, you won't have to bleed your brake. So remove the two bolts that hold the caliper onto the hub, and just basically lift it up. Once you've got the caliper removed, it's it's probably easier if you have somebody else hold the caliper up, and then basically remove the brake rotor from the hub. This particular brake rotor had been removed in the past, and there was actually a shim in the back. I've also marked the shim and the orientation. Just to make sure that I put it on to the right bolt, I will temporarily mark that bolt with just a little bit of Teflon tape. It won't get in the way, and it's easy to remove. So I'll take that and put it below. Okay. Now, next thing we need to do is to remove the brake shoes from the assembly, and I'll show you how to do that with the next close-up. Okay, this is what one half of a brake shoe looks like, and this is in the proper orientation. While it's on the hub, you'll have, if it's not damaged, you'll have a spring going from this hole to the opposite hole on the other pad, and you also have a spring going in this hole here to the opposite pad, and an adjuster that's at the bottom here. So I've already removed this side. The trick to get these off is to, and you don't need to remove the hub to get these off, which is a good thing. You pop out the pad forward or towards the rear, and you then compress the spring seat in, and then turn it to get it off of the stem that's holding the brake shoe in place. So to do that, you pull, use a screwdriver once you can get in to see the side, and twist it, push it in. It takes a little bit of English to get it off, and it's not a pretty a pretty process, but once you get it off, you get it off. Okay, once you've got the assembly, the brake assembly disassembled, I strongly recommend you use some sort of brake cleaner to basically get rid of all the brake dust off of the brake assembly and all of the parts that you are intending to reuse. So this is what you're going to need as a part of the reassembly. You'll need the 2 brake shoes, the retaining springs, the adjusting wheel, the 2 retaining springs with the spring seats, and then on the back of the back side you're going to need these retaining clips as well. There's one on each side. When you reinstall the brake shoes, note that there's 3 holes in each of the brake shoes. The top and the bottom hole are for the springs, and the middle hole is for the retaining spring, where you have the clip going through the brake shoe and into the retaining clip. Also note that there are indentations. So the proper orientation of this is where the indentations at the top of the brake shoes are aligned, as well as the curved cutout area at the top here. This part will go around a bolt at the top of the assembly, and there will be a tang that will insert into the 2 rectangular grooves at the top. Here you can see the proper orientation of the springs as they're assembled onto the brake shoes. The barrel of the spring is on the outer side of the brake shoes, so it's facing towards the back of the hub. Do not try to assemble the springs so that the barrel is on the inside of the brake shoes. So to assemble the brake shoes onto the hub, what you'll need to do is install one of the springs, the top spring, and take this 3-part assembly and put it onto the brake hub. When installing both of the brake shoes and the spring, you're going to have to be careful of getting the spring to go past this stud at the top. So it's going to take a little bit of jiggling it around, but you install the 2 pads with the spring, the 2 shoes with the springs installed over this. Otherwise, there's no way to get the spring reinstalled inside of that hole. So it has to go in as a 3-part assembly. These are the 2 tangs that the rectangular features need to interface with. This one here, and then on this side it is that tang there. So it takes a little bit of jogging around to get it in, but this is what it looks like. And then you need to make sure that the brake shoe is pushed away from the hub when it's interfaced that way. Okay, now that the brake shoes are in place and the spring is tucked underneath the bolt The next thing to do is to align the brake shoes into the tangs, and that can be done using a screwdriver. Just make sure that the tang gets engaged into that rectangular recess on both sides. Okay, so they are on. That was not easy. What I ended up finding out and putting this together, the best approach is to put on the rear shoe first and install the retainer spring, and then put the front shoe on and orient it so that the spring comes across the stud at the top, and then put the retaining spring on that one as well. And the reason to do the rear one first is there's no physical way to get your hand in behind to hold the retaining clip that holds the retaining spring in place. So you got to be able to reach it from the front side, and the only way to do that is to assemble this side first, and then you do have the ability to get to the back side of the retaining spring through these holes in the dust shield, so you can hold it in place and put the retaining spring in. So that would be my recommendation when you're doing this. So now we've got the retaining, that we've got the spring, the new spring, the one that broke, that's in place. The retaining clips are in place on both sides. The next thing we need to do is, and the last thing we need to do is install the adjuster, star adjuster, and the retaining spring in the bottom two holes. Before we do that, it's a good idea to take some lithium grease and spread that on the threads to help make sure that this doesn't freeze up over time. Also make sure that you have the window in place where you can see the adjusting star adjuster at the bottom. So I'm going to grease this, and then I will begin to put that in place. Okay, now I'm going to make sure that on the star adjuster your two slots are lined up before you can put those in. Alright, so before putting the star adjuster in place, I will install the spring in the bottom two holes, and then what I'll end up doing is spreading that in order to get the star adjuster. So put the spring in, we'll spread the brake shoes and insert the star adjuster. Okay, so remember, when we're putting the spring in, we're putting it so that the hooks are facing inboard and the barrel is on the outside. What I'll do is go from the underside here, spread the brake pad a little bit so I can see the hole. This spring does fit relatively easy into the hole. I'll put this back and then take a pair of pliers and stretch it and go into the hole in the rear brake pad. Okay, that's done. Okay, unless you have superhuman strength, which I do not have, you'll need to spread the brake shoes a little bit in order to get the star adjuster in. So what I've done here is basically just jam a couple of screwdrivers in at a little bit higher than the retaining springs, and just spread it out. This makes it a lot easier. I can just insert this and then slide this side up, and all I need to do now is remove the screwdriver, and voila, it goes into place here. Make sure it's lined up before I let it go. There we go. Here we go. Star adjusters are in place. Everything is lined up. Okay. Now, next step in the process is to put the rotor back in place, and then adjust the brake shoes so that using the star adjuster, and making sure that that it all lines up or gets just hand tight. So you don't want the brake shoes to be too tight against the rotor. So we'll put the rotor on, tighten it up so that it's hand tight, and then we're going to back it off about 8 teeth. So as I'm tightening this, in order to tighten it, you've got to push down. You want the star adjuster, which is going in this direction. You need to turn it so that it is turning towards you. Okay. So I've got my spacer marked, and there's my mark. That's on. Where is my mark? There is my mark. There. Okay, everything's back in place, at least to the point where it's not okay. So I'm going to need to rotate this down to where I can get to the star adjuster, and then I'm going to rotate it until it is hand tight. So I'm going to first get the car out of gear. So now I've got both the passenger side and the driver's side rear wheel jacked up. I was able to turn the wheels in order to align the adjusting hole or the adjusting window to get to the star adjuster. So it takes a little bit to get it lined up by hand. The tires don't want to turn because the universal joint actually doesn't like to spin when it's jacked up like this. I put the parking brake handle to approximately 4 or 5 clicks up. Got that tight, hand tight, so that it wouldn't spin, and then I backed it off 8 turns. So everything's assembled, ready to go. Note, when I did this, I put a couple of lug nuts on to tighten up the rotor to make sure that it was sitting squarely against the brake shoes. So I did that, tightened everything up, put on the handbrake, made the adjustment to be hand tight so it wouldn't spin, and then backed it off 8 turns. So we are good to go at this point. Well, that did it. The emergency brake now works, and my driver's side rear tire or rear wheel is no longer overheating. So everything's back to normal. I can get back to driving the Corvette again without worrying about having to break down at the side of the road. So hope this was helpful for you. If you enjoy what you're seeing, please do me a favor and subscribe. I'm trying to build up a website that others will find useful, and any subscriptions you can make will help me towards that goal. Thank you.